Today's notes are going to be on 3.6 age structure diagrams. So let's just go ahead and jump into this. Okay, so what are these diagrams? Age structure diagrams are models that predict the population growth rate of a population by looking at a general shape of a pyramid. So there's two things that are compared on a age structure diagram, and those two things or two factors would be biological gender. This is where you're comparing the ratio of males to the ratio of females. And then also you're going to be looking at age cohort. So gender is usually represented or divided out or partitioned here with uh, biological males being on the left side, biological females being on the right side. And then the age cohorts sort of run here through the middle. So we've got 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14. You can kind of see they're broken up into 5-year increments all the way until we get to 100 plus. And so then we also have this age cohort, which again are when we have the age groups from infancy to adolescence. And when we really tend to look at reproductive years, so really from like 15, which I know is kind of young for the US, up to about 45. So this area here would be the reproductive stages versus post reproductive, which is like after 50. Okay. And we know that, I mean, there's always exceptions. There are people that have kids beyond that, men especially. There are, people that have children well into their 50s, 60s, and then there are those that are not as young or those that can't have children. So there's always exceptions to all of this, but that's kind of the general age range that we look at. We look at not me, but countries actually look at age structure diagrams to make predictions about their population growth and what sort of services and things will be needed in the future. Okay. So, age cohorts, and what do these tell us? Well, age cohorts, just to kind of refresh what I've already said, are groups of similarly aged individuals. So, 0 to 14 is that pre reproductive, 15 to 44 is reproductive, and 45 plus is post reproductive. Again, I know there are some cases of people having children after 45. There's also a size difference between 0 to 14 and 15 to 44, which indicates a growth rate. So, for instance, if you're looking right here at this kind of pre reproductive age of 0 to 14, and it's very widespread, that means that you have an expanding population. You have a lot of young children, babies, that are in adolescence essentially. And so they're all going to grow up and need services. And so, or we assume that in some developing nations, not all babies make it. They also have a high death rate. And so they get very narrow quickly at the top of the population age pyramid. So, anyway, so this is an expanding rapidly population. The more narrow that it becomes at the base, that tells us that the population rate is decreasing. So here, this is expanding slowly. If we were to look at our age structure diagrams for the US, Australia is in a very similar situation as well as Canada. We'll see that our country is not growing at that high of a rate, at least not as high when we're talking about these countries over here. And then a stable population growth rate is when you have a much more narrow base, even more narrow than, and these countries tend to be growing, but the number of deaths sort of equals the number of births. So they're not growing, they're kind of staying stable. So a little bit wider at the bottom. Obviously, it's going to be more narrow at the top because as our population of humans age, we're going to have increased death rate at this higher level. And then a declining population is when the top of the pyramid is actually wider than the bottom of the pyramid. And so examples of countries in this situation would be Germany, Bulgaria, Italy. Germany's really concerned that have a declining birth population rate. And so they're trying to really bring in even people from outside of, they're trying to bring in a lot of immigrants so that they can have a larger population growth. Okay. All right. So that's what these different graphs show us. This would be really important to know. So I would maybe draw these graphs into your notes so that you are familiar with what those ages or what those structures show us. And then I would also write down some of these examples. Okay. All right. So again, here's just what that looks like. I kind of already talked about this. Let me go back to the previous slide. Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure I've covered everything on these slides, and it looks like I have. Okay, so practice reading these diagrams. So looking at these diagrams, which one, and we'll spend a minute here, which one of these, and I'm going to get rid of so I can see everything, which one has the highest growth rate and which one has the lowest growth rate? So take a look at that. You have to look at the, just as a reminder, you have to look at the dark green bands, so that pre-reproductive age. And if we were to look at this, we'd see that this, India, has the highest growth rate. The US would be next. China would follow. The US, it's a little more stable, you can see here, but it is growing just a little bit. If we looked at these reproductive ages, we'll probably see a little bit more growth here in the dark green eventually. Right now, it's not quite stable, almost. And then this is Germany, which we've already discussed. They have a declining population because we can see that base is more narrow. So that's the order with how those look. Here's the number of 0 to 14 individuals, just to give you some perspective, because you really can't see how many people are in each of these different age cohorts. You're just looking at, well, I guess you can. It does say population size in millions, so I guess you can see that. But just to tell you, India has 360 million pre-reproductive age people, US 62 million, Germany 11.5, and China 270 million. Okay. So again, predictions can be made about these populations in the future. All right. So practice FRQ. I'm going to get rid of my picture here just so that it's not in your way of your question. But it says, identify the country with the slowest population growth rate and explain your answer. All right. So if you have any questions, make sure you're talking to me in class, and I will see you guys next time.